Yeah.
Trey Tracks, I think we got one.
It's voting season, bruh.
No voting, no loving. No voting, no touching. No voting, no nothing. No voting, no fucking. No voting, no fucking. No voting, no loving. No voting, no touching. No voting, no nothing. No voting, no fucking. No voting, no fucking. BLK app looking for some action. Swear the homie Scott was heavy. Face is a 9, abs a 10, D is a to be determined. He got mad jokes, he don't seem broke. The only red flag, he said he don't vote. This midterms for all the single cuties. Wanna hit this booty, gotta do your civic duty. No voting, no loving. No voting, no touching. No voting, no nothing. No voting, no fucking. No voting, no fucking. No voting, no loving. No voting, no touching. No voting, no nothing. No voting, no fucking. No voting, no fucking.
Yeah, don't stop now. Stuff my ballot box again, but my homegirl through. Put the buying partisan. Politics be so nasty. Make me wanna flirt ya. Show you how to be a poll worker. Legs in the air, I don't care. Anyone could get it. Universal health care. If you wanna come before the deadline. Come in the jacuzzi, gerrymander this coochie.
No voting, no love. No voting, no touch. No voting, no.
As we move into the midterms here, you say that we're actually seeing some real movement among a core Democratic group.
Yeah, so take a look here. This is black voters' electoral preferences and pre-election polling. Look, black voters are the core part of the Democratic Party. And as you can see here in the race for Congress, look, they're still getting 74% support in the pre-election polling right now. But compare that to the final polling for 2020 president and 2018 Congress. Back in 2020, it was 84%. 85% in 2018. So you're clearly seeing right here that there is less support for Democratic candidates for Congress among African Americans. And you can look at the Republican column as well, and you can see that 12%, not exactly high, but that's actually the high watermark. It was 9% in 2020, 9% in 2018. So basically what was about a 75, 76 point margin is now down in the low 60s. So look, Democrats still well ahead with African Americans, but in a game in which you're trying to drive up margins, the margin among African Americans for Democrats is clearly down.
So what's going on here? What's the cause of this?
You know, there's a lot of things that could be going on. And the truth of the matter is, when you look across polling, it's actually kind of hard to build up a large enough sample size to really dig in on a lot of questions. But I think that this kind of gets at the core part of it. Take a look at Joe Biden's approval rating among black adults. If you go back to January to June of 2021, look how high it was. It's 87%. 87%, basically matching what he got in the 2020 election. But look at that approval rating now in August and September of 2022. It's all the way down to 64%. Now, obviously, Joe Biden's approval rating with all Americans is down, but it's not down by anywhere near this amount. This 23-point drop among all Americans, it's only down about 10 to 15 points. So there is a disproportionate drop in Joe Biden's approval rating among African Americans. And I think that's kind of driving why you're seeing Democrats running for Congress getting a significantly lower margin than we're used to seeing.
Woo! The last 2 years have been really tough.
The pandemic and inflation have hit Americans hard, increasing long-standing disparities in some communities. And African Americans want the president's attention.
As a middle-class black woman, I don't see the push for the black economic community like really exploding. I think the message is being delivered, but I don't think the message is being captured in the way that we want it to be captured.
So clearly, we're not hearing a rhetoric that would be indicative of an absolute fidelity or devotion to the Democratic Party or its president. Moreover, what CNN presented to their audience in terms of the findings is a bit lopsided. That's because black men are far more likely to vote Republican than black women. Data from the 2020 election found that Trump won 26% of black men without a college degree, 22% with a college degree. And given the trajectories that we've been seeing of late, we can expect those percentages to go even higher in the next elections. Brad found that Biden's approval rating had dropped nearly 20 points among blacks since he announced the draconian constitutional vax mandate. According to the poll, Biden's approval dropped a stunning 17 points among black voters around that time. And as we saw CNN admit to us, that fall in support continues to plague Biden to this day. But something even more significant is happening here. Something, frankly, many of us didn't even realize. What we have to remember is that for the last several decades, the Democrats have worked hard at forming a coalition of voter constituencies organized around what's commonly referred to as identity politics. The technical term is actually emancipatory politics, but it's all the same. Identity or emancipatory politics re-envisions the state
Meanwhile, 16% of MSNBC voters and a fifth of CNN voters said Hispanics have internalized racism and a desire to fit into white society, which is causing them to lean Republican. The survey also asked how many CNN and MSNBC voters themselves have bought into false stories. Joining us now to weigh in on this data is Abraham Enriquez. He's the president of Bienvenido. Welcome, Abraham.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, great to have you. What do you make of this? Are Hispanic voters being tricked by lies and misinformation in order to join the Republican Party? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, look, Robbie, I don't think I would give misinformation or disinformation too much credit. If you know the Hispanic community, at Bienvenido, we have discussions and conversations with Latinos all across the country. And poll after poll after poll shows that the number one issue that Latinos care about is the economy, right? And inflation, as it has reached a 40-year high, has really crushed Hispanic budgets across the country. And when you look at the Hispanic family, we're a multi-generational family. Latinos have more children, therefore more mouths to feed, and we have less money to be able to do that. And so as midterms are coming up, I think that Latinos really are starting to see that the Democrat Party hasn't done a good enough job to provide economic relief and economic opportunity within the Latino community. So while Democrats might, throw the ball and throw the blame at misinformation, what it really comes down to is they haven't really been able to provide policies that Latinos have been able to feel within their homes. So I think what we're going to see in November is Hispanics aren't really voting for party like we've seen in the past previous years, but more so voting for policies and candidates that have been able to really articulate the importance of conservative leadership and fiscal responsibility that provide economic opportunity for Latinos all across America. Well, look, Latinos are very hardworking, right? And I think the important thing to note here is that from 2010 to 2019, the poverty rate within Latinos dropped by 40%, meaning that we're a very mobile, upward mobile demographic, right? So when it comes to political outreach and candidates coming into our community, we want candidates that speak to our aspiration and not make us feel like victims. And in this past, election cycle, gearing up to the midterm elections, truly see the difference in how Democrats are outreaching to Latinos, really sticking to that rhetoric of victimhood and the need for government assistance, the need for government care. And the Republican Party really has shifted gears and started talking more to Latinos in a way that we're not seeing the need to assimilate to a culture that really isn't ours. We're truly met where we're at, with talks about economic opportunity. It talks about how conservative leadership, again, is a leadership in past conservative White House that has allowed Latinos to see like the lowest unemployment rate, the highest number of four-year university within Latino students. Now more than ever, Latinas are opening up businesses than any other demographic. So I think that when politicians are able to go into the community and really sound off policies that have made room for those economic growths, is how you win the Latino vote.
Yeah, it's interesting because despite working so hard, they're still the most underinsured ethnic group in the country. Something that really resonated with voters in Nevada, for example, when Bernie won that state and the culinary union with rank and file broke away from the leadership, particularly on the issue of healthcare. I think a lot of folks are concerned, especially small business owners, that their ability to start a business, to grow their business is really impacted negatively by the responsibility of employers to provide healthcare for their employees. And a lot of folks, especially in the business community, are increasingly understanding that a universal healthcare system is a real boon for entrepreneurship. But I'd like to get some other put some other poll results to you if I could. The Texas Tribune reports that immigration and border security are a leading cause for voters to flip from Democrat to Republican. The predominantly Hispanic border town, Terrell County, had only 12% of its registered voters cast ballots in the Republican primary back in 2014. Fast forward to today, and that number has nearly tripled. In 2022, 31% of the county cast ballots in the GOP primary, compared to just 10% in the Democratic primary.
Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reports that working-class Latino voters have their eyes on one thing, as you've said, Abraham, the economy, causing another split from Team Blue. However, Democrats do have a leg up on the issue of abortion. According to new polling, inflation was the main concern for Latino voters at 48%, while women's reproductive rights and abortion rights were the top concern for 28% of those surveyed. Addressing gun violence, mass shootings, and improving wages were the third most mentioned concerns of how could Republicans, kind of close the deal and actually take back power in the midterms, given the way things are going.
I don't give too much credit to the Supreme Court ruling, leaning Latino voters specifically to the Democrat Party. And I'll tell you why. I think that when it comes to the pro-life issue and women's reproductive stances, when you talk to Latinos, I think wherever you sit within left or right or even in the middle, one thing that we can all agree on is that America, for a very, very long time, we've had the most extreme radical abortion laws in the books, right? I think when you talk to most Hispanics, Democrat registered Hispanics, they even say, yeah, my party has embraced this late-term abortion rhetoric that I don't agree with. So while the Dobbs decision maybe did sidetrack a little bit of RNC outreach and Republican outreach, I think when you talk to Latino voters, like the voters in South Texas, they're still very much so pro-life, and they still believe in the importance of saving and protecting unborn children. And the Democrat Party really hasn't done a good job of laying a clear boundary of when it becomes too extreme. And this idea that you should embrace late-term abortion, sometimes even minutes after birth, I think that's something that doesn't sit well with Latino voters. We talked about South Texas and how open border policies and border security has really pushed Latino voters to embrace Republican candidates. Mayra Flores down there, for instance, flipped a Democrat seat that was under Democrat control for over 150 years. She did that by running a very solid campaign that focused on the issues of security. So when you go down to these rural cities, right, where most Latinos are at, things that they're talking about are inflation, the economic crisis, and border security. They're not so much talking about this pro-life issue, right? So I think that we still have enough time from now to November for border security and the economic crisis to be the leading charge into why Latinos will be voting conservative more than in previous years.
Congresswoman, none of this matters unless there's a nuclear war, which you voted to send arms and weapons to Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard, she's left the Democratic Party because they're a bunch of war hawks, okay? You originally voted, you ran as an outsider, yet you've been voting to start this war in Ukraine. You're voting to start a thermonuclear war with Russia and China. Why are you playing with the lives of American citizens? You're playing with our lives.
There will be no neighbors if there's a nuclear bomb. You voted to mobilize and send money to Ukrainian Nazis. You're a coward. You're a progressive socialist. Where are you against the war mobilization?
Thank you, gentlemen. Now we have reached the point for final moments of this debate. A chance for your closing remarks. You have 60 seconds.
Each have 60 seconds to answer, and Senator Warnock, you have the floor first.
Well, thank you so very much, Georgia. It's wonderful to be here. Listen, in this state, we have nearly 11 million people, and only 2 people get to represent us in the United States Senate, just 2. And when I think about that, it is an awesome responsibility, one that humbles me and inspires me to work as hard as I can for hardworking families every single day. and I've worked with Democrats and Republicans in order to do that work. These are difficult times. These are dark times. But the scripture says that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness overcometh it not. I'm honored to represent you in the Senate. I hope that you'll show up to vote early, beginning Monday. I'd be honored to have your vote. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Mr. Walker, your turn for closing statements, and you have 60 seconds as well.
For those of you who are concerned about voting for me, a non-politician, I want you to think about the damage politicians like Joe Biden and Raphael Warnock had done to this country. I want you to think about Raphael Warnock, what he said today. And I said he was going to try to give you some smooth talk and tell you what's happening. What's happening is this country is hurting. What's happening is we need leaders. So what I want to say to you, Senator Warnock, is I want to thank you. I want to thank you for this. But at the same time, I want to say Georgia needs leaders. They need leaders that's going to stand up for them. So let's think about if we give Senator Warnock 6 more years, think of what this country will become. I'm not sure if we can make up for that.
Gentlemen,
so I said vote for Herschel Walker.
Thank you both, gentlemen. That's going to conclude our debate for this.
Instead invited Biden to come back, but Joe's response was off-putting.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
The comment may have been directed just at Charlemagne, but it plays into the false notion that Democrats own the black vote and don't have to earn the black vote. Furthermore, a privileged white man does not get to dictate what is and isn't black. And unfortunately for Joe, Twitter is on a tirade, calling him entitled, an idiot, and wondering if he truly is the lesser of two evils.
Do you support reparations for black people?
Well, listen, again, we had over 200 years of slavery. We had Jim Crow for almost a century. We had legalized discrimination, segregation, and now we have segregation and discrimination that is not legal but still exists and is a barrier to progress. We have disparities around housing. We have disparities around education. We have disparities around income. And we have to recognize that everybody did not start out on an equal footing in this country. And in particular, black people have not. And so we have got to recognize that and do something about that and give folks a lift up. That's why, for example, I'm proposing the LIFT Act. Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit black children, black families, black homeowners, because the disparities are so significant. So if we focus on the specific issues that have resulted in the greatest disparities, and we understand that that's part of why we're doing it. Listen, the reality also is this: any policy that will benefit black people will benefit all of society. Let's be clear about that. Let's really be clear about that. So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country, right?
At a time when Washington is increasingly bitter and divided, the Senate came together today to overwhelmingly denounce and tackle hate against Asian Americans. Senators passed the COVID-19 hate crimes bill 94-1. Only the Missouri Republican Josh Hawley voted no, calling it too broad. The rest of the United States Senate